Welcome to the Kaiju Network podcast, where we have a very healthy obsession with kaiju. I am your co-host, Kent, and with me is your other co-host.
Jason, how's it going, peeps?
All right, so episode 122, here we are again. We are discussing another Godzilla anime. I tell you, it seems like yesterday we were talking about the first one, because that first anime came out roughly around this time last year. And
Yeah,
here we
hard to
are at
believe.
the conclusion of what's arguably one of the more contentious, oddly enough, Godzilla entries in the series. Not just this particular movie, but this entire anime trilogy. So I just thought before we begin, those of you who may be watching or listening probably have already noticed, I posted some photos yesterday
Yeah,
on our Facebook page.
I saw
And
those the other day.
yeah, apparently, and I guess this is spoilers, I have not heard any of the rumors as far as what this is or what it's supposed to mean within the context of the film, but apparently one of the spoilers with the toys is a fire or burning Godzilla. So
Yeah, I've been looking at some of the YouTube channels out there discussing the film itself, and I've watched particular videos where they kind of discussed potential rumors of a burning Godzilla, where one of the scenes in the most recent trailer to Godzilla King of the Monsters kind of indicates or pointing towards that whole rumor. And when I was looking at that one figure that showed that certain Godzilla figure, which I think kind of increased that rumor or sort of say
confirmed.
confirmation towards a burning Godzilla. But whenever that movie comes out, we can definitely know for certain what that whole thing is about.
My fear, though, I'm just hoping it's not like um, some sort of pull a pull an ability out of your butt type of thing, like you see at the end of Gamera 2, the Heisei film. Like I told one of our page followers, they were saying, this is a spoiler for many, and I go, well, yeah, it is for me, but I'm like, it's still is something that I find to be incredibly interesting because I don't know exactly what it means or how it's going to be used. I have not heard any rumors. Part of it, outside of just being busy in my own day-to-day life and just not having the time to really go around searching the internet looking for rumors and other things related to not just this movie, but really anything else.
There's
I have no clue. And to me, I think it's still going to be a surprise as far as when it happens in the movie, because when it comes to certain things that I've been exposed to advertently or inadvertently, there are times when I go to the theater and I either forget that spoiler or I still remember that spoiler, but I don't know exactly how it's going to play out within the context of the film.
right.
And I think this is going to be something where um, I may forget, but even if I go into the theater remembering that at some point this is coming up, probably towards the end of the film, I'm still going to be shocked because as of right now, I know it's coming, but I don't know how it's going to come about. I don't know if this is some sort of like ability that Godzilla can just summon within him, or what it is and how it's going to be used. So it's still going to be, I think, a real nice surprise. And really, like I've been saying for years on this podcast, and like I've said elsewhere, out in internet land where I have a bully pulpit, so to speak. I've been telling people when it comes to things like novels and movies and all that, I I just want to be entertained.
Mhm.
I'm not someone who, when it comes to spoilers, gets all upset about that, I guess. But I understand why some people would. But like I said, I just want a fun film, and at least judging from the trailers, I think it's going to be an incredibly fun film.
Yeah, there's at least a couple of theories from what I've heard when I'm diving into this sort of rumor is that uh, Godzilla faces King Ghidorah and then gets badly injured and everything. This is kind of where you'll see Godzilla in this whole underground cavern where Sarazawa comes up to him, and see him in the last two trailers, and then one of the scenes in that, I think in the first trailer, where we see that underground cavern just explode, and I think that this is the potential of the military or Monarch using a nuclear device to revive Godzilla in some sort of way to feed him, and thus kind of giving him like all this new energy, kind of what we've seen in the most recent trailer, and possibly this new nuclear explosion that they give to Godzilla probably gives him this new ability to maybe increase temperature, kind of giving him that burning Godzilla look. But that's just one of the theories from what I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be shocked. I figured it had something to do with sort of the stereotypical approach in films where you have a hero and then a baddie, and then they get beat up badly, and then they got to go regroup for a moment, and then, then something happens. They either retrain, that something happens to where they come back stronger. It's not the most, original idea, so to speak, when it comes to film, but as long as it's done in a manner that is appropriate for the film, I don't mind it.
Yeah.
So,
and then there have been other rumors of other kaiju in there besides Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah, and Michael Dougherty has, I think, kind of confirmed it. Don't quote me on that, because you see in some of the scenes in the new trailer where you see these legs coming out from the desert, and then that one mountain just moving and everything. A lot of people have said that, it could be Anguirus and Kamacuras. And to me, in my opinion, and from what others have said, that it would probably be a little bit costly for Legendary to potentially grab more. And plus, they didn't actually confirm anything when they were announcing that Ghidorah, was it Rodan, and Mothra were going to be in this movie. So to me, and some of the others out there have kind of this think that Legendary is at least creating some of their own new monsters to kind of face off against possibly Ghidorah, Mothra, or Rodan, just to kind of show their power / strength, see how powerful those monsters are.
Yeah, I mean, just because they didn't announce it doesn't mean that they didn't purchase other licenses, but
they could have done it secretly just to keep it hidden in a way. But
yeah, I think it's a good thing that if they are doing it, I like the whole idea of new kaiju being created, because that's been something I've been saying for quite a while, is that I don't mind older kaiju, or familiar kaiju coming up in different films. The thing is that after a while, it gets to be stale because a lot of the stuff repeats itself, especially at least when it came to the Toho Godzilla films, because we really saw it quite frequently throughout the Millennium films, where certain things from previous films were repeated, in terms of the approach to the final battle and how certain kaiju went about fighting each other. And that was something that, while the kaiju themselves were maybe updated to some degree in their appearance, the fights themselves didn't really change a whole lot. Now with Legendary, with the four monsters that we know are in this film, yeah, they're all a little bit different in terms of their look, but at the same time, you can definitely tell, you can be like, okay, King Ghidorah looks very similar to what Toho's done in the past. Same thing with Rodan, Mothra, Godzilla, etc. But at the same time, too, I think what's great is that because you're getting a different culture, basically a Western culture approaching these films, that injects some different and new life into these fights, but still at the same time, the fact it is still that, okay, we've seen this before. What this particular movie is, even though it's called Godzilla King of the Monsters, this is a more updated version of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster,
basically
64. And it's like, we've still seen this before. I'm okay with that because, again, we're getting a different studio doing this. They're having a different take on it, which is great. This franchise is in desperate need of injecting new life, which has been, when we talk about Planet Eater here in a moment, you know, as everybody knows, I'm a huge fan of the anime trilogy, mainly because it is so wonderfully different. It's not something we've seen before, even out of Toho. And I'm wanting new kaiju. And one of the reasons why I love Godzilla 2000 so much, outside the fact that I personally believe it has some of the best miniature work out of the Millennium series, that I think it has some of the best acting and some of the best writing out of the Millennium series. One of the things that I enjoy about it so much is that you get a new kaiju villain in Orga. Sure, yes, that final form of Orga, the suit is relatively stiff and all that, but the whole idea behind Orga, his origins and how he comes into being within his physical form in that final fight and everything, it's really fresh and new for the Godzilla franchise at that moment. And that's one of the reasons too why I love that film so much. You get a different kaiju in there. And Ex Megaguirus, that was a film for a while. When I first saw it, I didn't care for it, and a lot of it had to do more with the fact that I thought the human characters were a real letdown in that film. But then as time has gone on and I've watched that film more, I've warmed up to the characters. I still don't think they're great, but I still like the movie more. And as I've watched it more through the years, I have tended to really dig more of the kaiju scenes, especially with Megaguirus, because again, Megaguirus is something totally different that we've seen in the franchise. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy. Yes, forget the fact that the Megaguirus prop is stiff as a board and, you know, it's not mobile, but the fact that it's a dragonfly that has certain abilities we've never seen in a Godzilla villain before, even up to this very moment in time. I really love that. And it's just like, okay, yeah, I can go along with the human story. It's still not the greatest, but I love the kaiju scenes now because it's so refreshing. It's like, okay, now we have another movie with King Ghidorah. I can kind of tell you more or less what's going to happen in this fight, etc. So it's one of those things where I know a lot of people enjoy having some of the old kaiju come back. I do like that, but as an old saying goes, familiarity breeds contempt. And I'm at that point in my personal fandom where it's just like, I need something new in this series. And I don't mind if you bring back old kaiju, but you need to really do something different. And that's what the good segue, I guess, into Planet Eater. That's what Planet Eater and really this whole anime trilogy has done. You get familiar kaiju in Godzilla, Mechagodzilla, and King Ghidorah, but you really change them. And that's the thing. It's like, do something different, do something fresh with these characters, and or bring in some completely new kaiju characters. So with that, let's just go ahead, dive into Planet Eater. I will start with a plot overview of Godzilla Planet Eater. And the movie opens up within moments after the conclusion of the previous movie. Godzilla is in a state of rest. Metphis tells Haruo that they have a god that can kill Godzilla, but the only reason why this plan wasn't implemented sooner was that they needed as many people as possible to hate Godzilla so much that their hatred would summon their god. Metphies, along with an elder, uh, is he Bill Saluto?
Who?
Metphies.
No, he's the Exif.
Exif. Okay. Metphies, along with an elder Exif on the ship above the earth, gather followers to pray to their god so it'll come and kill Godzilla. That god, of course, is Ghidorah. It comes and kills many on Earth and crushes the ship in space. Godzilla awakens and Ghidorah comes down via 3 orbs in the sky. Ghidorah is three serpent-like creatures that arrived via a portal from another dimension. Initially, Ghidorah is able to attack Godzilla without having to have damage inflicted to it due to its ability to bend space. Metphies continues to persuade Haruo to join in the sacrifice, but Haruo resists. He's put under hypnosis by Metphies, where Metphies tries to manipulate Haruo. Metphies reveals that, yes, while Ghidorah destroyed his world, he and his people have revered the creature as a god, and some of them were spared to be used as sacrifices and Ghidorah's eyes for the planets Ghidorah would eventually destroy, including Earth. Eventually, Haruo comes to and destroys Metphies' right eye, which was used to guide Ghidorah. This makes Ghidorah mortal, and Godzilla is now able to destroy the 3 serpents. He also destroys the 3 orbs in which the creature arrived from. The dawn arrives, and Metphies is on death's door. He tells Haruo that as long as he's alive, Ghidorah will be watching. Haruo mourns the loss of Metphies. A montage is played showing how former Earthlings and current native Earthlings begin to recover from the attacks and start growing communities. Haruo, however, still has hatred for Godzilla. He takes Yuko on a reconstructed vulture ship built from nanometals towards Godzilla. Godzilla destroys the ship, killing Haruo and Yuko. The movie comes to a close, and a post-credit sequence shows natives and children honoring Haruo with a statue. All right, let's get into our discussion here. One of the things that I kind of wondered throughout the previous 2 films as I watched them, I did kind of wonder if Metphies and his particular race were maybe up to something.
Yeah, because
I didn't know what, but I wondered if they would have something to do eventually in the story.
Yeah, because I know the last time when we were going over City on the Edge of Battle, and we were kind of discussing kind of our assumption of what the 3rd movie was going to happen. And I kind of discussed that with that little coin that Metphies has. I think it had something to do with Ghidorah and everything. I think and I mentioned something about all of this, and pretty much kind of my entire assumption of what happened pretty much came to fruition, but a lot more. I was kind of surprised of what actually happened throughout this movie.
Yeah, I didn't actually think maybe he was going to be sort of, he and his people, the Exif, were more or less, what's the word or term I'm looking for, sort of the initiators of this plan that went down the entire time, going back to Earth and then basically setting everything up in motion or letting certain things happen to a point where Ghidorah could be summoned. And one of the things that I enjoy about this whole guiding Ghidorah and being this planet eater, planet destroyer, is that anyone who remembers sort of Ghidorah's backstory from the Showa era, in that this was a kaiju that went from planet to planet destroying it. And that's exactly what's happening here with this version of Ghidorah. So I'm kind of like, oh, maybe the Exif were actual aliens even during the Showa era, even though they were never mentioned. Maybe they were guiding Ghidorah. You know, I know that's not true, but, you know, the fanboy in me is kind of like, oh, you know, that actually plays very well. You know, that's sort of a callback, at least, to the Showa era Ghidorah, in which this is a destroyer of worlds. But here you have a race of people that are helping to guide it and set events into motion that allow for those planets to eventually be destroyed by Ghidorah. I've really found that to be kind of a neat little connection with the Showa films.
And one of the things here is that at the very beginning of the film here, where that one scientist was kind of theorizing that the way that all these monsters on Earth were rebirthed and everything with nuclear weapons and everything, that he was thinking that humanity was guided to do to give the rebirth of these monsters and everything else that happened thereafter. So that kind of also plays into what you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm. And another thing I want to say that I had mentioned towards the end of our discussion of that second anime episode or anime film is that I remember saying, I bet Mothra is going to show up. And she does, albeit it's a very short moment. And, you don't really see much in the way of detail
You only
of her.
just see the silhouette.
Yeah, but nevertheless, she's technically in the film. So,
Yeah. The only thing is that you don't actually see her in the reality of that whole film universe, but just in Haru's consciousness
mhm.
there when they were with, I think, I forget her name. Was it Rianne? And then that one scientist guy trying to transmit their thoughts to Haru just to get the message uh, across to him there.
Mhm. And one thing that I predicted that I thought would happen that actually didn't, I had predicted that I thought we would actually see Mechagodzilla this time.
That's kind of what I think I was thinking about that too, that we would actually see him in with the Saludos and the humans too, trying to come together and trying to help out,
Mhm.
trying to help Godzilla and try to destroy Ghidorah. But yeah, that didn't
Yeah,
actually happen.
yeah, because my theory, was sort of like, okay, well, they were maybe initially going to build Mechagodzilla to fight Godzilla, but then when Ghidorah comes, basically Mechagodzilla's teamed up with Godzilla to help fight King Ghidorah, and then from there, maybe Godzilla destroys Mechagodzilla. They have a brief fight or something like that. But of course, that didn't happen. Um, what did you make of Ghidorah actually being more or less just three individual serpent creatures and not really basically, being like what we've known Ghidorah to be, basically a winged dragon with three heads on a big bulky body.
Well, I know we do see a silhouette at least a few times of him as a full bodied
We
version,
do, yeah, but
but
that
and
we never actually see that within the actual fight itself.
right, we just only see three really long headed, kind of serpent like of Ghidorah coming through. I think supposedly this void or black holes are stationed in the sky and everything, and the way it was designed is pretty unique. There's multiple eyes, you can say, on the head of these three serpent-headed Ghidorahs, and yeah, it's a really unique, interesting take on the character itself, and I don't quite have enough words at this time on how to describe it. I know I've been planning on making a little blog on daikaijunetwork.com maybe today or tomorrow on my thoughts on the entire uh, Godzilla anime trilogy, and I probably would have some more thoughts on it of the design of Ghidorah. But yeah, it's a really unique look or design, and I think it kind of breathes new life to that character itself.
Yeah, I still personally am not exactly sure as far as what to make of it fully still. I'm not, that's not to say that there's a part of me that dislikes it. It's just that it's so different uh,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not entirely sure what to make of it. It's sort of like my feelings on Mechagodzilla when we got that second anime film out here odd number of months ago, where I was like, oh, I thought we were actually eventually going to get the full machine. I thought, okay, well then maybe we were going to get it in this film. And then since we didn't, it's just like, okay, what do I think of Mechagodzilla now? And it's just like, well, yeah, Mechagodzilla was in the movie, but not in the robot walking form that we've been known to know this mechanical creature, creature in quotes, by over many decades worth of films. And so with King Ghidorah, I really love the fact that this is a creature from another dimension. This is a creature that uh, as we see within the film as it's attacking Godzilla, is very powerful. That's something that I've always been frustrated with practically every incarnation of Ghidra that Toho has brought out. That's, you know, if you go back and listen to previous podcasts and even podcasts where we reviewed films that had King Ghidorah in it, one of my biggest gripes with that character has always been this character is supposedly Godzilla's arch nemesis, but this character has never shown ever outside of maybe the Kaiser form, which even then some people debate whether or not that's a actual good like King Ghidorah of sorts. But this character has never really shown to be at least Godzilla's equal. It's always been Godzilla's inferior opponent. That's why for years I've always said I personally believe Mechagodzilla to be Godzilla's arch nemesis because Mechagodzilla time and again has proven to be a much more um, a more prominent physical powerful opponent than King Ghidorah. And I think definitely that changed here with this film. And I think it's going to change with this upcoming film here in what, May? And
Mm.
so that had me excited about that. With the actual design and all that, I really like that. I mean, yeah, I got reminders of Manda, of course, with
Yeah.
this. But at the same time, the fact that this dragon comes through a different portal through another dimension, and then it comes also down through three separate orbs in the sky, and even that causes some chaos on the surface of the Earth. I found that to be really interesting. In fact, I find that to make Ghidorah more intimidating because not only is Godzilla significantly bigger in this anime trilogy, but obviously Ghidorah is too. And having three separate orbs at various points in the sky means that this creature is it can cover significant amounts of area. And the fact is, though, too, and we may never know because the film's never described it, is Ghidorah in terms of its size or the length of its body or necks or whatever you want to call them, is it infinite or is it finite still? And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I find intimidating about this Ghidorah is that it is not a single body creature. It comes down from three separate locations and it can come around and wrap you up like an anaconda or, you know, a boa constrictor and what have you. And they have their own unique powers that we're used to having Ghidorah have over the previous films within the franchise. I like it. I don't know if I'm necessarily in love with it, at least at this moment in time, but I do like it.
Well, and I think the other things that make this iteration of Ghidorah more intimidating is that uh, with it being from another dimension, that it our universe uh, is it rules and everything don't apply to its whole physical being,
Mm-hmm.
in that it can bend
Bend space.
both time and space, from what
Yeah.
we've seen from the from the Artrum segment there of the film, and it can't be physically be touched or anything of the sorts, unless the only way you can do that is shatter that one token that Mephis has, which of course Haruo does, and then once that token is broken, then that whole space and time bending and our rules from this universe will then apply to Ghidorah and it can be physically touched and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, I think some of those things that are applied to Ghidorah makes what makes that character so intimidating in this film.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's been very consistent with this anime trilogy is that, with the exception of the Servum, which are dangerous creatures, they aren't incredibly large creatures like your Godzilla, like Mechagodzilla City, and even King Ghidorah. But your larger Kaiju, your Godzilla, King Ghidorah, and Mechagodzilla City, the way that the powers and the abilities that they have are powers and abilities that are incredibly powerful. The nanometal capabilities of Mechagodzilla City, I mean, are extraordinary. And then the fact that Godzilla himself is a creature that has been able to reproduce many times over, but then also prove to have this shield about itself that is incredibly hard to take down. And the fact that it's able to really to just take everything thrown at it, including what Mechagodzilla City threw at it in the previous film. And even for a while when Ghidorah is attacking Godzilla, it's biting Godzilla, trying to disable its shields. It takes Ghidorah even a while to disable those shields enough to even start inflicting harm on Godzilla and then sucking out its energy. And then that, of course, moves into Ghidorah. Again, a kaiju that's able to take down Godzilla's shields. It takes a bit, but it's still able to take them down without having to do too much. Mm-hmm. And it sucks its energy and all that. I mean, the kaiju that are in this trilogy are incredibly powerful, and that's what I like. There's no inconsistencies here, and they have some of the similar abilities that we're used to these kaiju having, but they bring about new, unique abilities or maybe amplified abilities that they've had before, and that just makes them significantly more powerful. And that's something that I really enjoy about this, is that it's a completely new take, but at the same time, these familiar kaiju are just, they're beefed up, and it's not like, okay, Mechagodzilla is weaker than Godzilla and King Ghidorah is weaker than Godzilla. It's not doing a GFW type thing where Godzilla is this hulking beast and everybody else is just fodder. Every kaiju is beefed up and has unique abilities to fight one another. Mm-hmm. And it's that's something I've really enjoyed throughout this entire trilogy, because it makes every single kaiju on the same level, but each kaiju has separate abilities that are pros and cons against the others. And that's something that I really love, and that's something that I think, sadly, most fans have failed to notice, is that there's been this consistency with the kaiju being all beefed up and powerful within this trilogy. And I thought that would be something most fans would enjoy, because it seems like, at least when I go through various Godzilla groups and pages on social media, especially Facebook, it seems like everybody every once in a while is talking about what is the most powerful Godzilla. And then a lot of people recently have been still talking about, well, is it Shin Godzilla? Is it GFW Godzilla? Or even Burning Godzilla, because Burning Godzilla has the ability to like blow up or melt down and take everything with it. And I really thought that, at least for a certain sect of the kaiju fandom, this would be something that would really be of unique interest to them because it just seems like that particular discussion comes up every so many months or what have you in the kaiju community, like which
or
got
once every year from the sounds of it. When we go to G Fest every year.
yeah, and yeah, it just seems like that always comes up.
And I think since you kind of mentioned that, is I think, let's see, with the conclusion of this whole anime trilogy, and if you now if you can compare this Godzilla with the other iterations of Godzillas from the past films, and even the legendary one, I would say that this anime version is probably the most powerful one. I probably would even say by far.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the outside of size. I mean, as of right now, yes, it's the biggest Godzilla
Well, size, yeah,
ever. But on
obviously.
top of that, in terms of abilities, and more importantly than anything else, just being able to take a beating, that in and of itself, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think with its hide here, I would say is probably the toughest
Mhm.
skin to penetrate. I would even say far tougher than the Shin Godzilla iteration.
Don't even bring that film up.
Well, sometimes you gotta compare it.
It's not a Godzilla film.
I'm just talking about the
I know,
character of Godzilla.
I know. Um, I thought it was a shocking ending again, and I think we brought this up
Yeah, I didn't
a
really
bit earlier.
expect this kind of ending. I thought that they would potentially rebuild, maybe just underground, obviously, with Godzilla roaming around the planet, but kind of integrating with some of the technology that they've scoured. But it was actually quite the opposite.
One of the thing though that I really didn't think of until like 5-10 minutes after I got done watching, I started thinking about the movie a little bit, was that basically nothing happens to Godzilla other than the fact that the survivors just again have to live alongside Godzilla.
Hmm.
So in a way, that leaves an open enough ending to where if someone wanted to come in and continue the anime trilogy story, they could, because the last time we see the anime Godzilla is when he destroys Haruo and Yuko and that vulture, and that's it. Like Godzilla isn't in a sleep stasis, he's not killed or transported to another dimension or whatever. He's alive and well on the planet. So it's just like, okay, it'd be interesting how humanity moves forward. Are they still going to try to create cities, knowing the fact that Godzilla is still here? It's interesting because then my brain started rushing as far as like, okay, technically they could continue this story if they wanted to because you didn't kill Godzilla or whatever. So I find that to be interesting that they left it on that note.
Well, and then with the post-credit scene itself, it was actually taking far into the future where we see either, was it Rian or Mina uh, sitting there and really aged. You can see like the lines and wrinkles on one of their faces there. So it's far into the future where basically we don't even see the former human beings, with like the scientists and the soldiers and everything, and it's just all it is just the current human race that have lived on that planet for thousands of years.
I thought it was interesting for the first time ever in any Godzilla film. We have people talking about intercourse.
Yeah,
And
I
you
think
have
this is
Haruo being pursued by those twin girls, and one of them, just takes off her clothes right in front of him and offers herself to him. He turns her down, but then has sex with her sister a while later. It's a little
well,
weird, but
basically, is Mina was the one that helped them uh, get medicated or from the
he got
first film.
medicated.
from the first film, you know, healing all his wounds and everything and all that stuff. That's kind of how led up to. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think this has to be the first time in the Godzilla franchise where something like this sort of situation occurs.
Yeah. Interesting. I thought Metphase's monologue is really intriguing with
Oh
giving
yeah.
background on his people and why he's doing what he's doing, and not to mention his methods of attempting to manipulate Haruo into being sort of the ultimate sacrifice that would eventually help Ghidorah kill Godzilla should Haruo sacrifice himself like those people,
And
which
then
also leads me into one of the creepiest moments I've ever seen in film, and it's done really well because when I still think about it, I get a little bumpy about it, where the people are just fed up with Godzilla and they start praying to Ghidorah, and then Ghidorah, like the spirit at least, comes through and starts taking people's arms or taking part of their heads off.
yeah, I was fairly surprised of that whole thing. I was like, holy shit.
I said that out loud. I was sitting in my chair and that came out, and they were showing, the shadow of Ghidorah coming out of that stone. And I was already starting to get goosebumps. I'm like, oh, this is creepy. I like it. And then it starts taking limbs off. You see people's arms or legs, part of their head coming off. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, I actually sat there in my chair and said that out loud. I was not expecting that, but I like it.
Yeah. And then that one scene where Metphes takes his right eye out and places it with that one token coin. And, when they were kind of alluding up to that point, you see his hands and part of his like sleeve was covered in blood. It's like something happened. And
like
the camera was getting closing in on that one left hand there, with that movement. And it's like something's up.
Yeah, I mean, it's so graphic, but at the same time, I love it because, again, some people may be turned off by that, but again, my personal battle cry on this podcast for almost the 8 years that we've been doing it, or actually the 8 years we have been doing
Close
it,
to 9 years.
has always been, yeah, my battle cry has been, sure, more Godzilla movies is good, unless you're Shin Godzilla, but I'm wanting something new. Give me something different, because the Millennium series outside of G2000, and even then that had a similar typical formula to it, but it was different enough in certain respects. Same thing with Megaguirus. And even GMK, but GMK's execution just was not the best, and their characters were sloppy. But I really thought, give me something new, give me something different all around. And that's what this entire trilogy has done. Basically, top to bottom, just practically everything about it is so new and different. And, here it gets a little bit more violent and a little more gory. And I'm not saying that, I love all that gore. In fact, I'm actually the opposite anymore. As I've gotten older, it's harder for me to take gore and all that stuff, just because it kind of makes me a little sick to my stomach. But the way it's presented here is unique, and it's just like, this is so creepy, because again, you have this alien race, which is, being the guides for King Ghidorah, and King Ghidorah actually needs to kill people to become strong and to eventually show up on that planet to destroy it. It's wonderful, because GMK tried to make really all those kaiju, including Godzilla, gods of sorts. And you had Baragon, Mothra, and King Ghidorah being the Earth protector gods. And while unique in terms of concept, my problem has always been that the execution within that movie of that concept, it fell incredibly flat. It was not done really all that well. And what this anime trilogy has done, or at least this particular entry with King Ghidorah, it's realized that, and realized that to a level that works. It's creepy. It does make Ghidorah invincible up until that token is destroyed, and then he becomes part of the actual world. He isn't able to bend space and time anymore. He becomes part of the actual physical reality,
Mhm.
so that Godzilla can now destroy him. Um, that's, I mean, it just, my mind is blown that just how some of these concepts, like Ghidorah being a god, or just a kaiju being a god, while having been done before, but it's actually executed well this time.
Hmm. And it's not uh, that whole God concept wasn't uh, created on Earth. It was created by a completely different race, and Ghidorah isn't wasn't part of Earth to begin with, but part of this whole different dimension. So they just kind of like what you were talking about. They probably took bits and parts of that whole concept from maybe from GMK, but then just rewritten it completely different to kind of fit what they were trying to do with this entire trilogy.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really like, and I love a good story, and as I've gotten older, I love a lot of interesting philosophical dialogue. Like, if anybody has watched the classic Twilight Zone series, there are some episodes where there are decent stretches of dialogue where they talk about certain philosophical concepts. And that's always, especially as I've gotten older, has continued to really intrigue me. And you get that and quite a bit even in this anime trilogy, and I've always enjoyed it because I feel like, unlike a lot of films that are out there, not just Godzilla films but just movies in general, I feel like a lot of films do padding, that there are certain things you could take out and you wouldn't really change much, if anything at all, with the film except the runtime. With this anime trilogy, and I believe I said it when we talked about either the second film or maybe even the first film, maybe even both, I have said that really every single second of these films matters, uh, because you have material that helps to explain the story, helps build story arc, helps sets, or even foreshadows, and maybe even sets up events that are yet to come, and then everything is eventually tied up. Everything, every single second matters, and those two movies. And I know fans that I have read various comments on social media have said that one of their issues with at least the first two films is the fact that they're so dense, that there's so much talking and stuff like that. And I've responded to some of those comments saying, but that's what makes this particular iteration of the Godzilla character or universe so unique, is that you get all this information and it's a totally new world, and you need this information because this stuff will eventually pay off as we move closer to the end of this series or
Right.
trilogy. And it all matters because it's something different. This is something that's never been done within the Godzilla franchise before. You can't just open up and try to bare bones it as best as you can.
And
Would that
basically doing the
satisfy?
same formula over and over again with, all with it just being monster battles. And that's basically what people are looking forward to. I think they're just really not used to a whole lot of human interaction or
Right.
the whole human side of the story of basically what this entire trilogy has been mainly focused on.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they are wrong to maybe want more kaiju battles. I'm not saying that they're wrong. It's just that this is something different, and you have to go with it. If you still try to do the best you can to go with it, and it's still not your cup of tea, then that's fine. But I've noticed some people, especially after this Planet Eater they, I think, hate watched it. They already made up their minds that this trilogy is something that they don't like, but went ahead and watched this final installment anyway, just so that they can go ahead and hate on it. Uh, but one of the things that for me, like with Shin Godzilla, I'm not a fan of that. And I saw that film in the theaters, and I was really excited for it. And I
Both
went
of
with
us.
the concept with it, but and I really tried, and I've seen that movie 5 or 6 times outside of theaters. And every time I try to go with it, I try to go with its story concept and everything, but still when the credits roll, I'm like, that is not a Godzilla film. That is not even a good Godzilla film. And it's like I try to give the film its premise, and I still can't go along with it because I do have certain issues with it. But one of the interesting things I find to be so unique. I find the fandom, I find watching the fandom and seeing their reactions to Shin Godzilla, but then also this anime trilogy. And I find it funny because some of the things the anime trilogy does in being different and unique are some of the same things that they praised were made Shin Godzilla so
Yeah,
great.
because
And
Shin Godzilla also is kind of heavily focused on the human side of the story and a lot of talking
there's
there.
very little Godzilla action, and yet Um, everybody loves that film. I would argue, though, the difference between Shin Godzilla and this anime Godzilla is that Shin Godzilla, the characters still aren't fully formed. We don't get much, if any, of a background on practically all of your main characters. And on top of that, there's really no one to root for because each and every single one of those characters is sort of grotesque in a way because of things that they try to do to gain um, uh, 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 like a higher status within the government or in their positions of work. They're all ugly people because their motivations, everybody has sort of negative motivations in the big grand scheme of things. You don't have a hero, and I'm not saying you have to have a pure black and white. I'm not saying that. I like complex characters, but when you don't have certain characters that even try to be good, but maybe still stumble now and then, that I have a problem with. And that's the problem with one of the main problems I have with Shin Godzilla. The human characters, there's nobody to even remotely like. With the anime Godzilla, you have characters that have good story arcs. With most of our main characters, you do get enough of a backstory to understand where they're coming from and why they're doing what they're doing. Haruo, especially, he's been our eyes and ears more or less throughout this entire trilogy, and we do see his backstory. In fact, we see his backstory multiple times throughout this 3 movie trilogy. That's really redundant, these 3 movies. um, and on top of that, you see him having complications and issues and struggles, making some bad decisions here and there in terms of executing certain plans to attack Godzilla. We even see some characters who we thought were good guys, like in City on the Edge of Battle, who actually, towards the end of that particular movie, became villains. And providing certain twists and turns and sort of realistic takes on the human characters. And that's something that I really love, is that we get better characterizations, we get better story arcs, completed story arcs, and you actually get some individuals in this movie who you can root for, even though they are still flawed.
Yeah, so yeah, I really got nothing else to add on that note. Basically, you kind of pretty much taking care of everything.
Yeah, and when I talked about in our final episode of the year here just a couple weeks ago, I reviewed the soundtrack, the score by Maestro Takayuki Hattori, and I remember saying how much I really enjoyed that score and how I love the music. That is arguably, at least when it comes to Godzilla films that he scored, that is arguably his best. work up to this point. I don't know if he'll end up doing any more Godzilla films or not. Time will tell. But I was saying that that was a great listening experience. It's one that you can actually listen to by itself and have a lot of fun with it. And I was anxious to see how it was going to work within the film. And I tell you, it may it's possible that the music works even better within the film. It creates a mood. Like when the movie opens up and you have that weird kaleidoscope effect happen
That
before the
montage.
title card, like the music, it's creepy and ominous and it sets a tone. And then just how it works throughout the course of the film, even when Ghidorah is, or at least the spirit of Ghidorah is coming out of that stone and starting to consume people, just how creepy. It's not just creepy in terms of visuals, but the music complements that scene too and making it even really creepy and grotesque. It's the music, even while as a standalone experience works really well, it works even better within the film.
Yeah, it's like when I was listening to the soundtrack too, the night before when we did our final episode of 2018, is that I didn't really get that whole creepy feeling, but once the third and final film of the anime trilogy came out, it really not only you saw that whole some of these creepy scenes in that film, but that score really helped made it even more creepy.
Yeah, I mean it's masterful, and you know maybe in people who aren't hardcore Godzilla fans and maybe pay attention to some of the nitty gritty that some of us do, may not realize that yeah, it's the same composer throughout all three films. And like I said in that year end episode we did here a couple weeks back, I said you see not see but you hear a lot of versatility within his music with this particular score. And just when you listen to the scores from Planet of Monsters to City on the Edge of Battle to this one, you do see his versatility throughout the entire trilogy. That it is the same maestro, but he provides unique music to what the themes and the purpose and the tone is supposed to be for each individual film. That is something that has proven to me Takayuki Hattori, and I really believe this even going back to when he scored Godzilla 2000, that this guy is versatile. When he did Space Godzilla, I don't think his score was all that great. Some of his themes were memorable, but maybe more infamous, I guess. But I do remember some of the pieces of music from that film. They're not some of my favorite, but they are, to say the least, unique. But I really thought when Godzilla, I remember when they announced he was scoring Godzilla 2000, I'm like, oh no, like I was not thrilled about that. But then when I actually listened to the score, I'm like, actually, this is really good. He's shown growth. And then we get to this trilogy, and he's shown even more growth. And even just progressing through the individual movies, these three movies have come out within what, a year into at least Toho theaters.
Yeah,
And
basically
even within
in a
a year
year.
here in the States, just even the growth and versatility just as we progress through this trilogy, it's really magnificent. It's unique, and I really love his music throughout this trilogy. And even though I wasn't too keen on the score for City on the Edge of Battle, just because that is more somber, I'm more of a marches and rousing themes type of person, but I can still appreciate that music. I can see myself going back to these three scores time and again just to listen to them, because it is beautiful music, and it's music that is very versatile. It's not sort of the same thing over and over again. And that's something that I've really loved about Hattori and his work with this entire trilogy, is that yes, you do get similar themes because obviously it's the same story, so you have to have some of those themes come back in some form or other. But there's a lot of differentiation throughout most of the musical pieces
Hmm.
in this trilogy, and they all work. They still sound like they were sewn from the same fabric. It's just they're different enough, but not so totally different that um, really think that different composers are doing it. I mean,
Or
if you listen
that
carefully, there are some similarities woven into each piece.
or that it's not completely different films, like three separate different films. The score, I think, just sews, like as you mentioned, but sews the entire trilogy together as one, and just kind of has maybe some of the same uh, elements within the music, but of course more versatile and just yeah, it's just it it kind of uh I would say uh goes in separate ways, or uh I'm not quite sure the kind of word I'm trying to get at here, that it's it, I would say maybe it involves, or I don't really know. I'm not sure what I'm trying to get at. I'm not I've kind of lost track of what I was trying to what that specific word is. It's at the tip of my tongue. I just don't really know, but it's just like what you mentioned, just really versatile, but at the same time it's keeping this entire trilogy uh, all in one, but not
Cohesive.
three. Yeah, cohesive. Yeah, that's the word I was thinking of.
Yeah, I mean it's beautiful music, and I know you said this particular score was on Spotify. I don't know, are the other two on Spotify or?
I'm assuming they are, but they probably are in Japanese. The one that I found here was in English for some reason, but I can't find the other two on
Yeah,
there. But I'm assuming that they're written in Japanese.
yeah. I mean, I would recommend to people, and I know again I've said this in previous episodes. Really seek out, excuse me, these scores because it's beautiful music. I know it's not Ifukube music, but I think the music to this particular trilogy is just as good because as much as I love Ifukube, the fact that I've heard his music so often over the years, and a lot of it's just been because I watch a lot of the Godzilla films in which his music is present. It gets to a point to where a lot of his music sounds
Almost the
almost
same.
almost the same, and it's gotten to a point where that's worn on me, and I really am looking for something unique within the Godzilla franchise and Hattori, uh, because of Godzilla 2000 when it was said that he was going to do the score to this. I actually, unlike with Godzilla 2000, when I heard he was going to score that, and I was just like, oh no. When I heard he was going to score the anime trilogy, I'm like, all right, let's go. And in my personal opinion, he has not disappointed. I really think he's done a marvelous job here, and I I love his work here. I really hope that whenever Toho begins to start revving up their engines again to do uh, live action Godzilla films or even more anime films for that
Yeah,
matter,
kind of
they
like
bring.
as they put it in one of the articles months ago, their own Marvel Cinematic Universe, like
Mhm.
with all these characters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's unique. Uh, what did you think of Ghidorah's death? Did you find it satisfying? Um, did you find the possibility that indeed maybe Ghidorah is a god? Because Metphys was saying, as long as you're alive, Ghidorah's watching. So that even though Ghidorah was killed, maybe Ghidorah's still actually alive.
I mean, from now that you kind of mentioned that, the the first things that have been coming into my head is that maybe these serpent like Ghidorahs. Maybe it was just more of an illusion, not the actual or real Ghidorah, or maybe there could be more iterations of Ghidorah himself in this different universe, uh, you know, beyond the void or wherever he's at. And maybe he has, like I said, different forms or what have you. Um, Maybe he's immortal, sort of say. Maybe you can't kill him or anything of the sort. And and I know you mentioned earlier that they could possibly have the way that Godzilla is still living at the end. That maybe they could have left it as an open interpretation of possibly expanding the universe, possibly, but I'm guessing that probably not. But uh, I would say that uh, Ghidorah is still out there, and that this wasn't the actual real Ghidorah that came in when facing Godzilla. So,
Yeah, I liked, albeit again, it's a relatively brief battle when Ghidorah becomes mortal, so to speak. But I found it satisfying. I like the fact that with each different head, Godzilla did something different to destroy. Like he took one and busted open the mouth Kong style. He took another
mhm.
one, and I think his tail like swiped it clean off. And I think another one um, he like swiped it with his claw, and then one of the previous ones he took his fire and like blew part of it off, and then no, he finished the last living one off with his fire that sent it back to the orb, finished that orb, and then went and destroyed the other two orbs
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah,
with it.
I thought that whole conclusion of that battle was pretty interesting.
I liked it. I mean, again, I know a lot of people have been disappointed with the lack of actual battles, but like I said, this is something different, and the fact is that you have you really have to be invested in the characters and their plight, and to be able to go with the moods and just the overall story itself, because not everything's going to be a WWE battle royale type thing.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things too. Like initially I was a little disappointed by that, but because I got so invested in the philosophy and the story and the characters within this trilogy, I'm like, I'm okay with that. I mean, we still get enough to where I'm like, for what we are given in terms of setting up these kaiju, what they're able to do, and just the world that they live in, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Not everything has to be a Rocky versus Drago 15 rounds sort of thing, even though that's satisfying, but not everything has to be that way.
Or maybe taking up like an entire battle, taking up possibly one third of the entire movie, which most, I would say, most of the Godzilla films have been doing
Yeah.
for the last several decades.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing too. There are other movies that already do that, And again, I want to see something different. And I'm not opposed to seeing like half the movie be a rock'em sock'em type of battle. I'm not opposed to that, but at the same time, it's like still give me something unique, give me something different. And that's been the problem with the Toho films for quite some time, is that there really hasn't been a whole lot of uniqueness, or when there has, it's fallen flat on its face. The execution of it has just been, to say the least, short, and
Yeah,
you
and
come away empty and disappointed by it.
yeah, right up to the 50th anniversary there with Final Wars. basically closing out the entire Millennium series, and with all the fans' reactions, and then kind of using the same formula that they've been using for those past 50 years, I think kind of caught up with them, and it just really wasn't quite working as well as it has done for many years up to that point. And then now leading up with the legendary films, and then now with is it the anime trilogy, and then take out the Shin Godzilla movie here with the different takes and the stories, and all that. I think is what we're seeing, kind of more of a revival of this whole entire kaiju genre, is that they're giving it different looks and different takes on these characters instead of just using that same formula that Toho has used for those last 50 years with their films.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking that maybe we should go with a different route, different formula with their entire property, and see if the audience out there will accept these giant monsters or this kaiju genre. And since I would say basically maybe with Pacific Rim, the whole the interest with the kaiju genre has been increasing relatively for the last 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and the directors even mentioned in a, I think, relatively recent interview, saying that Toho came to them and said, "Look, the monster battles really aren't the focus of this trilogy. We're doing something different." And if that is indeed true, I just have to say Toho finally they've got the guts to really say, yes, we need to do something different. And not only just in concept was this whole trilogy different in terms of the representation of the kaiju and the worlds and just the overall story, but the focus even as well is so radically different than what we have gotten before. And the entire Godzilla franchise, even when you include the two American Godzilla films. And because, in the past, anybody who's done research on, the Godzilla franchise, and especially when you look at the films like Bioline Space Godzilla, those two films, when they gave the director free reign to do just about anything he wanted to do, those films, from a financial standpoint, didn't do as well as Toho had expected. And then as a result, with the next film, Toho reined it in and said, no, this is the formula you got to do. And then it basically was a stereotypical formula that we're all used to. And again, of course, as Godzilla fans, we love all that stuff and what have you. We're used to that. But then, like I've been saying too, it becomes predictable. And it gets to a point where, even longtime fans such as myself, you kind of get tired of the same formula over and over again. You have a hard time getting excited about something new again unless you do something different. And yeah, Toho did try to do that with a few of the Millennium films. I think one of them definitely fell flat on its face. Another one came up short and wasn't all that spectacular either. They even tried things again with Shin Godzilla, but there were major, major issues with that I think really sort of crapped on the entire legacy of Honda and Tanaka with how they created the character and perceived the character to stand for. While unique, again, like I said, there are multiple issues with that particular film. But here, Toho's realizing we need a shot in the arm. And I understand that this anime trilogy with the fandom at large, at least here stateside, hasn't really been all that positive, which is very sad because, again, I think here, um, finally Toho themselves have finally caught up to the fact that, look, this is a character that's been around for over 60 years. We have to be doing something different to stay relevant, to bring in newer, younger fans so we can continue to make these movies so that we can make money and keep this franchise and this character going. Because you take a look at any long-standing franchise or character, they've undergone significant changes at various points. Superman's done it, Batman's done it, really all your major superheroes that were created in like the first part of the 20th century and are still around today underwent significant changes at various points. Not all of them, of course, were popular, or at least considered popular in the later years when some people went back to review them or whatever. But then some that weren't popular then, over time, have become popular now, like Batman '66. I remember various points. Even I myself went through a phase where I looked at that and I'm like, no, that's an embarrassment to the character. And then as time has gone on, I've gone back and looked at it again. And I'm like, that's actually one of the most ingenious things that's ever happened to the character. And every character and or long-standing franchise has undergone changes because you have to.
Yeah,
And
it's just like I grew up with the whole Dragon Ball franchise too, and just recently, was it 4 years ago, when they revived that whole Dragon Ball franchise, naming it Dragon Ball Super. They've expanded kind of the whole mythos and as well as the universe, and it just breathes new life into that whole franchise to where it's bigger than ever. And they've just here, I think this coming week, they're going to be releasing a new movie with one of the characters that wasn't really non-canon but really popular in Broly, who's kind of this legendary Super Saiyan, but making him now canon. And it's just, from I've been hearing, it's just a lot of positive reviews going on with that, and really making this character deeper than he was before when they created him back in the early 90s. And yeah, it's the way that they've reformatted or kind of redid some of the mythos and everything with that franchise has actually made it much better and just breathed new life into it.
yeah, I mean, you have to do that. I mean, you can even see it within the Godzilla franchise itself. Some of the changes may be more minuscule than others, but it's undergone changes. I mean, Godzilla throughout the '70s was more kidified than it would end up being throughout most of the Heisei era. I mean, you have to do that. I'm not necessarily saying either that people have to like it, but at the same time, I think fans need to be willing to be malleable to that as well, and realize that actually these major changes are a good thing because it means that it can attract newer fans, old and young alike, to grow the fan base and to keep this character going for decades to come still. But yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to discuss about this film?
Nope. I think we kind of covered quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I still
Here
could go
we,
on and on about various aspects, but yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think this is probably the deepest discussion that we've had on a film so far. Just just going over everything to where I think we've pretty much uh, talked about with what we needed to talk about here.
yeah, so why don't we go into our final thoughts on this movie, and then let's kind of talk about this whole trilogy as a whole with its overall story. So who wants to go first?
I can go first as far as this movie here. With only two viewings of this movie, including just not long ago before we started this episode here, it's the conclusion of this trilogy is pretty interesting to my taking. With some of the assumptions that both Ken and I have discussed about several episodes ago when we reviewed City on the Edge of Battle, and some of the assumptions that we've made on this film have come true, but some of them turn out to be non-existent within this. But then also added in some uh, surprising and or shocking takes within this film, and with the take on the Ghidorah character, I still don't have enough words to describe it, but it is, I would say, as of right now, an interesting, unique take on the character. Just only seeing kind of this serpent like coming out from these black orbs, not even seeing an actual full on body, with only seeing just a silhouette version of a full body version of Ghidorah. But the way that they executed Ghidorah itself is, I think, uh, a new, fresh take on the character itself. I think it breathes new life. And as Kent has mentioned, with it not being quite the rival that a lot of people make it out to be, I would say that part, I think, breathes new life with Ghidorah in this film, possibly uh, making that title known, or kind of making a statement on that title of being Godzilla's rival, with it bending time and space and being untouchable and that sort of thing. And it's a really fresh take on the character Ghidorah, and the whole conclusion of the film. Uh, well, with us kind of pretty much knowing what everything has been going on with Metphies, bringing in Ghidorah, and then the conclusion wasn't quite what I expected to be. I thought that they would build a new civilization, or kind of integrating with the whole new versions of humans on Earth, and bringing in this whole technology that they've brought along with them. But in the end, Haruo destroys basically everything along with him, dying by the hands of Godzilla there. And it's not quite the conclusion that I thought I had in mind, but it was pretty interesting in how it all ended, that whole entire trilogy. As far as a recommendation, I would definitely recommend it. I would say at least watch the entire trilogy in whole, not in just pieces here and there. I would say it would be, I think the entire trilogy itself, total runtime is around 4.5 hours, somewhere around there. So it would take a good chunk of your day to watch it in one sitting. So I would say do that. Watch the entire trilogy all in one, so you can get a good idea of what's really going on, not in just separate pieces here and there. Like, see it one day, and then maybe a week later or 2 weeks later you see the other film. To me, I think it doesn't do a whole lot of justice, or just seeing all these films out of order, then it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense in that case.
Yeah, I think the order, I think until you become incredibly familiar with the story, because these are very dense stories, I think until you've watched them enough to where you know the story, then it's probably, yeah, you can watch them out of order.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend watching them in order, and I would at least say do it in one sitting for the next 4.5 hours. So yeah, that's my take on Godzilla the Planet Eater.
Okay. Godzilla the Planet Eater concludes the first Godzilla anime trilogy in thrilling fashion. The plot is fast paced and gets to the point of bringing Ghidorah into the fray. However, those who have been impatient with the previous two films may find themselves a bit so with this movie as well, although not for long. There isn't much of a battle between Godzilla and Ghidorah, but once again, the character stories and arcs are what really have driven this trilogy. Rarely have I found myself so invested in the characters in a kaiju movie or show, and the Godzilla trilogy here has some, if not the best character writing for any kaiju film I've ever seen. This final installment is incredibly emotional due to the wonderful writing and music accompaniment. Maestro Hattori hit the ball out of the park with this film, and again, as I mentioned previously, maybe his best kaiju score work yet. The new look of Ghidorah is quite creative and intriguing while providing awe in the character, something I've never ever felt for this kaiju up until now. Haruo's story is touching and a definite arc of a hero. He's shown his strengths and his flaws throughout this trilogy. Planet Eater is a wonderful emotional ride and concludes a nearly 5-hour story. It's incredibly satisfying and one I believe every Godzilla fan should see. This entire trilogy has been tremendously fun, and I intend to watch all 3 movies back to back to back one of these days to see the entire story unfold in one sitting. What Toho has done here is masterful and the best work they've done with the character in years. It's worth watching, and of course, out of our ranking system, buy, rent, or pass, it's a buy. And then my thoughts on the trilogy as a whole. Again, anybody who has been paying attention really for about the last year when we've discussed these films knows I am a huge fan of this trilogy. Initially, I didn't think I would because, yeah, it's so different that you're not used to seeing sort of a slow burn within the story of a Godzilla film, let alone really any kaiju film for the most part. And this, for me, after watching that first film a couple of times before we discussed it almost a year ago now, really made me a believer in this particular trilogy, the story it was telling and where it was eventually going. And I love this trilogy. I'm really invested in the characters, their story arcs. I love some of the twists and turns this took. I love the fact that the kaiju get facelifts, and on top of that, some of their abilities are enhanced, and even to some degree as well, they even get some new abilities as well. As I stated earlier, the major kaiju in this franchise, which basically are Godzilla, Mechagodzilla, and King Ghidorah, they're both incredibly powerful kaiju, which makes it very consistent as far as how the kaiju are treated. All 3 of them are juggernauts, and it's just that they have different abilities. It's been a wonderful ride, and as we mentioned earlier, this final installment kind of left everything open to the possibility where you could continue the story. Where would you go from here? I'm not sure, but I'm sure you could easily fill in something. Heck, Mothra never hatched from her egg, so you could have Godzilla maybe battle Mothra or something like that in the next film or whatever. So yeah, I mean, there are possibilities here. Will they actually go back to this story? Probably not. If they do, it's probably going to be more in like maybe manga form or something like that, I would imagine. Again, it just kind of depends on where they want to go, but I don't anticipate them actually continuing this story at this point, really at all, ever. But it's been a magnificent trilogy. I've enjoyed the story. It's been a fun ride. Like I said, I loved a lot of the philosophical dialogue. It's been a dense experience. The first 2 films especially, you really need to watch multiple times to really get all the information you need because it's world building. This final installment still does some of that, obviously, but it's a more fast-paced, streamlined story this time because the first 2 films set up what basically is unfolding throughout really the entire film here, this third and final film. So you know, it's dense. I think it's unfortunate fans, at least at this point, haven't embraced it because again, this is a shot in the arm that this character, this franchise really needs right now.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's done very well. It's really some of the best writing I've ever seen in a kaiju film, and I really do mean that. It's been one of the great experiences I've ever had, not just with a Godzilla film, but with any monster film, period, including your Frankenstein's, your Draculas, and Creatures from the Black Lagoon, and all that. Again, there's nothing wrong with sort of the old formula, so to speak, with the Godzilla films, but like I've mentioned multiple times, it does get to a point where it's incredibly predictable, and you just kind of become very passive when you watch a lot of those films. You need something unique, and on top of that, while Toho again has tried some different things since 1999 with the character, a lot of the execution has fallen flat. And a lot of that, I think, is due to the fact that, at least during that period, their shooting schedule for films was incredibly short. And it really, made it difficult for a lot of directors to get things executed the way that they would want them to. I know gosh, I forgot. Shusuke Kaneko with GMK has complained with GMK that he was kind of disappointed in how parts of his film turned out because he didn't like the short shooting schedule for that film.
Mhm.
And with anime, I'm not sure how long it takes to create some of these. I know these films more or less came out within the span of about a year, so I don't know how long ago these films were put into production and how long the writers were given time to write the story. Nevertheless, whether it was short or long, the end product is masterful. And yes, I'm going to use that word because, like I said, this has just been an incredible ride. It's been a shot in the arm that I find to be very enjoyable. And I really hope that as time progresses, that fans will go back to this trilogy and really and really give it a second chance, because I really think that this is a gem. This is a gem of a trilogy. I'm really hoping Netflix brings this trilogy out onto a home video relatively soon. I really want to own this set and watch it multiple times. But yeah, it's been a wonderful ride. I really enjoy it, and I really hope the fandom tries to go back and really see the beauty that is this anime trilogy.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just a really nice fresh take on not only just the Godzilla character, but the entire universe and franchise. And like what you said, it's just kind of, oh, how do you say, a bit disappointing in a way as far as the fan reaction and everything surrounding this entire trilogy. But it's just, and then like what Kent said, it's just a nice shot in the arm, um, basically. And I do hope if Netflix, and I think that they should bring out the entire trilogy in physical form, as far as DVD, Blu-ray, and or 4K. Uh, if and when they do, it would be a definite buy for me, and then I hope for everyone else. As far as revenue, because then if they do bring it out physically, and then there's money to be made within that whole area, then they would definitely know for sure, certain, I would say, for both Netflix and Toho, that if there's really good sales for this trilogy if it was out on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K, then they would know that this entire trilogy would be worth it here. And I was just discussing while you were briefly away there, Kent, that if Netflix did, if and when they've released the entire trilogy on a Blu-ray, they would know for certain, both them and Toho, if sales were pretty good with the series in physical form or disc. Then they would know for certain that this entire trilogy would have been really good overall.
Yeah, and I think I've always kind of believed too, and I think there will be some exceptions to this, and again, keeping my fingers crossed, hoping that this does happen when they release it onto home video. But I even believe that those who didn't care for it or just didn't like it, period, if it were to come out on home video, would still buy it just because they'd be completists. They may never watch it, but they would at least want it as part of their collection. There would be some, yes, that I could definitely see that didn't like it and won't purchase it. But
like what we've done with Shin Godzilla, obviously you can see in the background there on Kent's shelf.
Yeah, it's just collecting dust. It's my dust magnet. But yeah, that concludes this episode. But I'm looking at the tentative schedule here for what we have. Let's see. Our next episode will be, today's the 12th. Our next episode will be the 26th. And going back to what I wrote up here odd number of months ago, our next episode will be Godzilla versus Biollante. So as I mentioned earlier, Biollante was one of those films in which a director was given free reign, and unfortunately it didn't do as well financially as Toho had hoped. So we're going back, looking at the schedule here, we're going back to the Godzilla well, continuing our revisiting. Jason and I have yet to figure out if we're going to end up going into the Millennium series. Actually, I have here at some point, yes, we will go back to the Millennium series after we have several other movies, new films that we have yet to cover on our podcast here. But yeah, basically from here on out for the next 6 episodes, we'll be covering the rest of the Heisei era Godzilla series, which I'm actually really looking forward to because, again, if you didn't catch our year-end episode here a couple weeks back, I was saying that because El Rey Network was showing their Godzilla marathon, and most of those films were Heisei Millennium films, that got me really excited for those films, and that influenced my rankings of favorite Godzilla films. So I'm really excited to visit, and of course, Biollante is one of my favorite Godzilla films as well. So I think it's going to be fun to go back and revisit. Not just that, really all of these.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I've watched that film, but just thinking of it now, I'm kind of wanting to get back into watching that. But then, of course, I've been thinking after when we get done with this episode, I want to actually get back into watching Johnny Sacco and his giant robot. I've only finished one disc of that show so far, and I think that was early last year, if I can remember, or it was back in 2017. It's one of those years, but I want to finally get back around to doing that show and hopefully get my take on that show in one of the episodes down the road here.
Yeah. I've watched that show in its entirety twice. Last time was December of 2017. I got it. I watched it over a period of like 4 days. It's a really nice show. I like it. Very goofy in a fun way, though.
Yeah, so far from what I remember, it's a good show. but yeah, it has a little bit of its quirks here and there. But
Yeah.
that's kind of the fun part with those shows back in the 60s and 70s.
For anyone who's just curious as far as what we are looking to do after we finish the Heisei era of Godzilla films, we're going to take a break in between. I think we will cover the Millennium series again, but we're going to be kind of cutting it up a little bit. So after Godzilla versus Destroya, we got Gorath. Then after that, we got Half Human. Then Super Inframan. I have Kaiju Potpourri on this, but this was because I wrote this to sort of be a map for last year that we may put in a movie there or move Godzilla 2000 up to that spot. Perhaps we'll see. Or even the next item, the Human Vapor, up in that spot. And then Godzilla 2000, and then Colossal, and that's as far as the schedule goes for the moment.
Yeah, I think one of these times we should at least insert one of the Ultra franchises or movies in there, because I think we've rarely gotten around to that. We've done episode by episode reviews before with Ultra Q and Ultraman,
We
but
did we do Ultra Q? I don't think we did.
I believe we have, but I think we just did just an overall
Okay.
iteration of that review instead of doing a episode by episode in the Toku Zone segment that we had, because we
Oh, I
did
totally forgot about that.
yeah, because we did an episode by episode basis with Ultraman and Iron King, and I think along with Red Baron, maybe.
Red
Yeah.
Baron, we didn't. I remember talking about that in its entirety after I finished it, like back in
Okay. Yeah.
2014.
Yeah. It was Ultraman and Iron King, which we did an episode by episode basis.
Yeah, and I know with Ultraman and Iron King, I think we did like chunks of 2 or 3 episodes at a time.
I think it was 2 episodes.
Ultraman, we did 3 towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's something I've been thinking about too. Because we both have Ultra 7. That's the sequel to Ultraman, and then we both have Ultra Q. I mean, that's something we could cover for like a few episodes as well. Like cover 2 or 3 episodes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
That would be something to look into. I mean, like I said, that's a tentative schedule. But like I said, there are movies on there we've never. I mean, I think we've mentioned in passing, like Gorath and Super Inframan, but we've never really discussed at length, obviously.
I could
So
have
there's
sworn
still some good stuff.
I could have sworn we've done Inframan at one point. I'm not certain.
I think I personally covered it again, like on a Toku Zone, but that
Okay.
never was the sort of main feature of an
Okay.
episode.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, again, we can go back and redo the entire schedule for a bit or whatever. But right now, I think it's probably good to just stick to at least right now wrapping up the Heisei series, and then from there we can make any changes that we wish.
Yeah.
Because that'll cover this next 6 episodes. So you're talking what, like you're talking about going through like maybe the first part of April with that. Although one of these months will probably be a 3-episode month, so late March, early April, sort of conclusion to the Heisei. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you haven't already, go watch Godzilla Planet Eater, watch this whole trilogy. Again, if you didn't care for it or maybe didn't like it, please give it another shot. I think it really is masterful. This is something that the franchise needed. It needed some new, really outside the box ideas, and it worked in my opinion. I think it worked not just in concept but in execution as well.
Yeah, and then also make sure to hit the subscribe button down below the video player, and as well as hit that notification bell to make sure you get any future updates on our videos, even when we go live or upload videos down the road here, and as well as make sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Google Play Music. But if you don't,
5-star reviews too.
yes, and if you don't like to subscribe to either of those things, I just recently updated our site to where below the main news slider, there is a audio player just right underneath that, and you can just go to daikaijunetwork.com and play our episodes in that section there as well. So you got 3 different places to choose from.
4 if you count YouTube.
That as well, but you can see us physically right here. So without the the intro outro music or anything, it's just more the basic stuff and the setup as of right now. And I know I've been messing with OBS, but it's just not really doing its job trying to get Kent's audio feed from the Skype. I have no idea why that's the case. So I know there's another alternative to OBS, but it's kind of expensive in a way. But I would think it'd be at least worth it. But I'm not gonna look into saving up for that as of right now. Since I'm saving up for other things at the point at this time in this point in time right now. So yeah, we're definitely looking into at least increasing our production of the DKN podcast here on YouTube live. So hopefully we'll get some stuff nice and kind of fancy in a way down the road here, and hopefully add some more content for this year. So just be on the lookout.
Yep. Once again, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll catch you in a couple of weeks when we discuss Godzilla versus Bylon.
All right, guys. Peace out.